Hello and welcome to Motivation Part 4, last part of motivation, the need to belong. Remember that we talked about in our first set of notes that motivation is that energy that drives behavior. So remember you're thinking about why am I motivated or why do I feel the need to have these behaviors? And we've talked about there's the need for hunger, so the basic needs that need to be met, hierarchy of needs. We've talked about sexual drives, and now we're going to talk about the need to belong. This is kind of a social psych unit. There's not a huge amount of vocabulary, but there's a lot of things that you need to know about the need to belong. Why do we feel the need to be incorporated into groups or to have relationships, meaningful relationships with other people? All right, so 4 slides, pretty short notes, pretty interesting. Okay, so let's talk about the biology. So remember, again, our psychosocial or biopsychosocial approach to motivation. So this is going to be the biology. Why do we biologically have the need to belong to a person and then to a group? Okay, and the roots of biology of surviving is that we need other people to keep us alive at a very young age. So let's start with our social bonds here. So our social bonds, so children, the need to keep children closer. So mothers feel bonded to their children as soon as they're born. And this is very important because children need food, they need protection, they need to be carried places. And that social bond makes us keep children closer to us. And that's important because when we keep children closer to us, they're more likely to survive. And then our family is more likely to survive over generations. Remember that the idea of survival is not as a person. So individuals never survive, but species survive, right? So the species, the humankind, survives even though individuals don't. All right, so that's maybe a biology need for keeping children closer, right? So we need to protect and let them go on. And then there's attachment and reproduction. This is talking about finding a mate. So finding someone that you feel close to, and this is the biology behind that is that you will reproduce with that person and then create offspring to take care of. So again, survival of a species. Now, these are all individuals, so one-on-one with children and one-on-one with a mate or someone to reproduce with. Now, let's talk about a group. So why do we need each other for aiding survival as a group? And this really goes back to cooperation and combat. In ancient civilizations, or just further back, when men or humans were fighting for food and shelter against either other tribes or against animals, they could fight others off easier in a group. Right, so think about like tribes fighting off other tribes, or if they're out hunting and there's an animal that attacks, one person cannot fend off that animal or a group of people, but a comrades or a group cooperating together in combat are able to do that. All right, so that's another group social norm, is that like we're going to take care of each other in combat. And then in our social psych unit, we'll learn about that people in every society on earth prefer us over them, that there's a sense of belonging to a group that gives us pride, that gives us purpose, that gives us some type of motivation to protect each other, us over them. Okay, so that's our biology need to survive. All right, now let's talk about some more social needs on why we are motivated to be in a group. So a big one is wanting to belong. Again, you can think about the biology roots of this, but as far as just relationship building one-on-one, as far as with friends or someone of the opposite sex that you are like have a loving relationship with, relationship formation equals joy. In all societies, in all people, the relationships that you form with other people make you feel good. And that's why we continue to make relationships. We continue to look for more friends, or we continue to maintain our friendships and relationships because they make us happy. Even without thinking about, I'm going to go out and be happy today and find friends. It's just a natural way that we feel joy. There was a study done with this question right here that said, what is the most satisfying moment you've had in the last week? And people around the world unanimously said that it was either something that made them feel good about themselves or something that happened with another person that they felt was the most satisfying. So a moment with a friendship or a partner or something that that made them feel good was about another person. Okay? So relatedness, this is a semi-vocab word. When we are related to other people with autonomy and competence, so those two things in between, you have a deep sense of well-being, meaning that when we feel related to our friends and our family and our loved ones, we have a deeper sense of well-being. We're happier people. This has a direct correlation to self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves. So when we're in meaningful relationships, we feel better about ourselves. And the reason why people conform, we've talked about conformity a little bit with Stanley Milgram's experiments, but conformity is really just a person or human beings trying to avoid rejection. Is the ultimate, what am I going to say? A mean thing is to be rejected in society. When we conform to a group or to a person, we're trying to avoid being rejected, and we're trying to make favorable impressions for or towards that person or that group. Now, this wanting to belong can cause awful things to happen, especially in high school. You guys are in high school, and I feel like high school is I want to say there's a microscope on all the social interactions in high school. And you get into the real world, they still exist, but they're not as focused. And so you've heard about some awful things like school shootings. And one of the first school shootings came in 1994. There's a kid in Southern California named Andy Williams. And he was one of the first school shooting kids where he went in and he shot a couple of his classmates. And he himself was not taken down. He didn't take his life afterwards. And this is him right here in trial. But he was considered by his peers when they said, "What can you explain what he was like?" And there was words like a freak, dork, nerd, etc. That wanting to belong and then being rejected led him down the pathway of going back up here. He didn't feel related to anyone, even his parents. He had very low self-esteem. His conformity to avoid rejection and to make favorable impressions in his mind was to be this, to make a name known for himself, to be powerful. That's in your book, and so I thought it was an interesting thing to talk about here. But when we're talking about making other people feeling like they belong, it's good to keep these things in mind. All right, that the actions that we have on other people are affecting them because of their wanting to belong. Okay, 2 more slides. So sustaining relationships. So once I belong to someone or to some group or to a friendship, how do we sustain these relationships? So something that you are probably familiar with is that parting or moving away from someone that you feel connected with, even for a short period of time, equals distress. That there's this constant or need for communication. Now these days this is a lot easier. You can text, you can email, you can tweet like in your phone immediately, but this is nothing new. So even without technology, there was this distress that came with parting. So people used to write notes or talk on the phone for long periods of time. So if you're in class with a friend who's in another class, or not in a class with a friend, you would write them a note. Just meaningless, but right? So there's this distress that happened and you made that feel better by communicating. And when the fear, and so this can also be a bad thing, so I was talking about abusive relationships, when the fear of being alone is greater than the fear of being either physically abused or emotionally abused, that is an abusive relationship. And oftentimes we wonder like why people stay in abusive relationships or why people stay with partners or boyfriends or girlfriends that are emotionally abusive. So they might not physically hurt someone, but they're emotionally, they say mean things, they bring each other down. And that's because this fear of being alone, right? That we want to belong to someone or something. That is where our self-esteem lies. Okay, another part of sustaining relationship is going to be threatening social ties, equals anxiety, loneliness, jealousy, and guilt. So when we feel like our social ties are threatened, so-and-so said you said this, and you know that even if you said that, or if you didn't say that, that whatever that was is going to make a lot of people mad or threaten your social ties, that makes you feel anxious, like, oh, I didn't say that, right? You get really defensive, or it makes you feel jealous of things that other people have or guilty of things you said, but you want to maintain those social ties because that social tie is a part of your self-esteem, your connectedness. Okay. Now, all these things about sustaining relationships I'm going to say a larger scale, has been recognized by like immigration officials in different countries, who are either taking in refugees or allowing like migration or immigration associates. So something called chain migration. So they implement chain migration, which means that if they have one family come to like a refugee camp, they always try and bring another family or a close by family that they know to the same refugee camp. Because what happened with refugees that were taken in from other countries or immigrants is that they would get to that country and have this utter feeling of loneliness and anxiety and guilt. And when you're feeling those things, you're not a productive member of society. So they started a policy called chain migration. And these policies encourage second families to join the first. Think about when you're in a new class and you look around. So maybe you're a junior and there's a ton of seniors in the class and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know anyone. And then all of a sudden, like one person that walks in that you kind of know, they might not be your best friend, but all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I know that one person. It makes you feel a little bit better, right? So or you're at summer camp and you know one person from like a friend of a friend of a friend. Like you kind of tend to cling to that person because it makes you feel better about yourself. You don't want to have that anxiety, all right? All right, the last thing about motivation of belonging to a group is the literally the pain of ostracism. So to be ostracized means to be socially excluded from your peers, ignored or shunned. Okay, so this is a vocab term. So socially excluded, ignored or shunned. This is considered worldwide the worst of punishments. So think about how we punish people, whether it be like your friends at school or convicts or people who break the law. We I want to say in medieval times or ancient societies, exile was the worst punishment over death, right? So instead of being killed, you were exiled. Remember Romeo, exiled out of the town. It was just devastating, right? You couldn't come back. So that's how, even early in civilization, they knew that the taking people away from their loved ones or their community was a horrible punishment. Okay, imprisonment, putting people in prison in solitary confinement, is considered a punishment. They're taking them away from their peers. Or think about that, like away from society, away from the things they know. That is considered a punishment. And I think I've said that before, but in ancient times, solitary confinement was worse than execution. So I believe it was Chinese culture, then like in I forget the years. I'm not going to pretend to be history right now. But there was like levels of punishment, right? And there was like imprisonment, death, so killing the person, and then solitary confinement. Solitary confinement was considered the worst punishment, being by yourself. In our society right now, it's considered the meanest actions. Think about a time in the last year where you felt the worst socially about yourself or even your self-esteem. Sometimes it's tied to like a test score or how you did at work or something, but a lot of the times it's because of actions of other people where you felt excluded, ignored, or shunned. And there's an interesting personality test, we'll end with this, in college, where they gave a group of college students, so kids that went to college that were pretty well liked, were smart, that had felt accepted enough to like go on to college. They gave them a personality test, like a fake personality test, and they gave half of the results to the group and said that you are more likely to be alone for the rest of your life because of your tendencies of not connecting with people. Totally not true, but they just told them you're less likely to form connections. And they told the other half of the group that your personality test says that you're more likely to have meaningful relationships, that you will not be alone. What they found with the people that they told that they were more likely to not be alone, so have a good life, is they had a better results on all the tests after that they had a positive outlook on the experiment, that they were overall felt better about themselves, self-esteem wise, connectedness to the group around them. The group of people that they said would probably be alone for the rest of their lives because of their personality test, all the tests that came after that, they tended to do worse. Their results were negative. They never felt connected to anyone in the experiment. And think about, like, these were people that were randomly picked, randomly assigned, so they had equal chances of being in either group. And just being told that you had a positive or negative outlook on being alone in life made a huge result, like just in that experiment. Okay, so that is the end of our motivation notes. Next, we're going to go into emotion. So how do motivation affect our emotions, and then stress? So what kind of stresses do we feel because of these things? Have a good night.